recorded too, because it sounds like the other one may have got.
The other one is fully recorded as well.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
And the comments?
And
All
the
the,
comments,
oh, so everything's fully, oh, okay. I just recorded again. Maybe we'll say something different. All right, for those of you that are stuck around or here for an encore presentation, my name is Tim Bray. I'm the Crow Wing County engineer, and my ears are a little red because I got a little nervous over the last hour or so. But I want to welcome you and those that are continuing to be online and to be in part of this process. You heard a lot of good comments, and I'm sure we'll get some more. But first, really congratulations on turning out like you did, turning out online. Hundreds of comments online about what you liked, didn't like, hot areas that should be fixed, or things that should remain the same, actually. We had a couple of council members here tonight. I don't think any more in the room. A couple county commissioners here as well from District 2 that represents this area. And then also the Corps of Engineers is here listening in as well. Let's see. So tonight we're going to follow on. We're trying to follow on with the public comments that we received online, follow it up with some technical data that Jake will get into here in just a little bit that is part of the presentation. And I guess we're going to do question and answer. And my first introduction was like, hey, let's hold the questions, but it was obvious that that was just not going to work, and it was good to have do a question and answer session, and we'll do the same with the group that remains. So I introduced Jake Bongard. He's the traffic engineer from Bolton and Mink, who has been in charge of measuring and analyzing the traffic, and he'll go through some of that about some of the alternatives that are on the table for this project. Jake, that's 12 years of experience as 16 years or 12 years?
You count internship 16.
Okay, 16, I will go with 16. 16 years of experience in traffic engineering throughout Minnesota, maybe even outside Minnesota. Jake, you want to take it away?
All right, yeah, thanks, Tim, and thanks for hanging around. I know you've probably been standing there a while, so hopefully I can live up to expectations here. But yeah, so what we're planning to do here is just go through a general overview of the existing conditions out here, talk through some of the considerations, and then walk through the alternatives and kind of what the impacts are of each of them and what we're seeing with them. So from a quick project overview, project partners. So it is led by Crow Wing County. The City Cross Lake is involved within the project management team as well, along with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers with their partnership and involvement with the west leg of this intersection with the campground and recreational area. So the overall project extents, and much of what you heard was a discussion at the 3 and 66 intersection. The project extents do go far beyond that. So it starts just south of the 3 and 66 intersection, essentially where that bridge crossing location is, up to Bald Eagle Trail along CSAH 66, and then from the 3 and 66 intersection to the east to Pioneer Drive or County Road 37. So while we are looking at a bunch of different intersection improvements, we also are looking at more corridor-wide improvements to improve pedestrian safety and connectivity throughout the whole city of Cross Lake. So this isn't our first venture. It isn't the first venture into this area. There have been some past work completed. So the first was the Cross Lake Parking and Pedestrian Route Study back in 2019. And with that, the sidewalk extensions and the improved ped crossings were established as part of that study. I believe that's where some of the RFBs that are implemented right now were initially generated from, but those recommendations were also carried forward. If that third bullet there, the transportation alternatives application. So with those recommendations, those were carried forward to an application to provide federal dollars to make these improvements. And with that came a $610,000 award to help build these crossings and build these sidewalk connections. Another study that was completed as part of this was the Cross Lake Water Quality Improvements Project. So that is work that was done to just improve overall stormwater treatment and quality throughout this whole area. So all that information that was done as part of that previous study will be carried forward into this analysis and project as well. So right now we are a little earlier, kind of study phase type, but once we get into the design and get that recommendation for that intersection alternative, all those elements will be reintroduced and incorporated within our analysis. The last item on there is the Eastern Federal Land Access Program. So that was another application that was submitted as well for intersection improvements in conjunction with the National Loon Center. So $850,000 was awarded with that application of federal dollars to contribute to safety and intersection improvements at the 3 and 66 intersection. So all that work, there's money available to help provide the improvements at this location. But yeah, we'll talk about what those different alternatives are. So just quickly with the project schedule, like I mentioned, we are in that study phase, September to December essentially. And then once that final recommendation is made of what the intersection treatment is, we will move into preliminary and final design with the end result of a construction project in the spring and summer of 2024. So just general project considerations, there's a board back there, a bunch of small notes on here, but just generally it just reiterates the project extents and highlights some of the opportunities and things that we're looking at with the National Loon Center opening. Some of the safety data, and we'll get into some crash history as well, but just a quick over considerations, and if you want to look into more detail after this, you can check that out or just ask me questions as well. So the general goals and objectives of this project, so there's a statement there, but I'll just dig right into the bullets, is to provide safety improvements to the County Road 3 and 66 intersection, provide pedestrian improvements along County Road 3 to Pioneer Drive and along 66 to Bald Eagle Trail, provide stormwater treatment improvements, so all things we've discussed. And then I think the last item that kind of qualifies into that additional consideration is the construction staging out here. And we know that the County Road 66 improvements north of town had some impacts and some full closures with it. While we haven't dug into that as part of this because we first need to identify what that intersection treatment is before we understand how we can build it. That is definitely something that's at the back of our mind, or I guess front of our mind, and how we're going to address that. And the 3 and 66 intersection, this area does provide more opportunities than what that project did to provide local detour routes, business access signing, and just alternate ways to get through the area as opposed to just the hard closure that was provided with that one. So from an existing conditions perspective, I know you've all driven through the intersection hundreds of times probably, if not more, but the speed limit out there is 35 miles per hour, just south of the bridge, south of the intersection, it's 45 miles per hour. As you get to the intersection, it's that suburban, urban type feel, so you have your curb and gutter. It feels a little more closed off with your businesses and parking on one side, your trees on the other side. And then further to the south, again, it's more of that rural feel. It's the wide open, wide shoulders. There's a decent amount of access points, but it feels like it's a higher speed roadway. So this roadway, this intersection does kind of serve as not a checkpoint, but somewhat of a transition between that rural and the suburban urban environment that you see between these two areas. So going from a rural high speed to more of an urban suburban low speed, it does kind of occur at this location. Also at the intersection, again, and I'm sure you know this, but the marked pedestrian crossings on the north and east leg with an RFB, which is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, which is the pedestrian flasher that you push the button and it lights up when you cross. So that's currently at that location just to provide a little more emphasis to those crossing there. Then as you know too, side street stop control, so that westbound approach is a stop sign, and then the eastbound from the campground also has a stop sign, and the north and south is a through movement. So we took that first initial understanding and we wanted to move into an intersection control evaluation. And what that is just looking at a well-rounded analysis of really safety and operations at the intersection. So we started with data collection. We had counts from a 2019 study that was completed in the area after Labor Day that we kind of had serve as a baseline because the road was fully open at that time. We also collected traffic in the middle of August on a Wednesday, as well as the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. And what we wanted to do is make sure we were capturing all these different data points of what the different traffic levels are in this area, so we're not being short-sighted and just evaluating one of the scenarios. And that 2019 also allowed us to kind of mold the traffic volumes a little bit just to move some movements around from when the road was open, just because patterns were altered a little bit with the closure, but we were able to kind of identify what those changes were and adjust accordingly. So in those counts that we completed, kind of an interesting fact, so the September after Labor Day counts we had, from there to the summer weekday, it was about a 15% increase in traffic. To the Labor Day Saturday, it was about a 50% increase in traffic. So pretty significant increase during those different periods of time. From a traffic operations perspective, again, I'm sure many of you have driven it. It operates pretty well today. The through movements north and south are uninhibited, so they just proceed through the intersection. The westbound movement entering, they have a stop condition, but oftentimes gaps are available to enter into the flow of traffic. So during Labor Day or these busy times, you may see a few vehicles stacking up, but overall it functions pretty well during peak and off-peak conditions. We do run traffic warrants, so looking at the mixture of traffic and the amount of traffic approaching from each directions, we have some standards that are kind of abided by us that we can run warrants to see if it's warranted to put an all-way stop or warranted to put a traffic signal. So in running those with the summer traffic, not the Labor Day, but just the summer, a signal and an all-way stop were both warranted at the intersection based off of traffic volumes that were collected. From a vehicle and pedestrian safety standpoint, so there's been 3 crashes at the intersection over the last 5 years. 2 of them were right angle crashes, so T-bone type, and the third was a rear end. So not a lot of crashes. So if you look at how that fits within statewide averages, things like that, it is within the acceptable range and the normal range for a through stop intersection in a similar environment. Traffic forecasting, so we do want to look forward and not just focus on today. So we do take a 20-year look back at how much traffic has grown within that period of time. And that helps us figure out trend lines of how much we expect it to grow. And it's been pretty flat over that time. So the East Lake has grown a little bit more than North-South, but that is a consideration we have, and we have grown our traffic volumes to try to represent that 2043 condition, but it's not significantly different from today. And then the other factor we needed to consider was the opening of the Loon Center. So how much traffic that's actually going to generate, how much pedestrian traffic that's going to generate is a little bit of an unknown until it goes in. But we wanted to do is make sure that we had an understanding of if it was varying levels, if these traffic control alternatives that we're looking at can accommodate the additional traffic or expectations to safely and efficiently accommodate any traffic that's coming to the intersection. So the alternatives that we looked at were first the do nothing, so just that existing side street stop control. And with that, we identified that as not meeting project goals. And reason for that is there is support for long-lasting improvements at the intersection that emphasize pedestrian safety while meeting the needs of the community both today and well into the future. And the existing facilities function today, but don't necessarily meet the needs of the community with added pedestrian vehicle traffic. So while folks can cross the road and enter into the road fairly efficiently, as we introduce the National Loon Center, it's expected to introduce additional pedestrian traffic and vehicle traffic, just add more complexity to the intersection. So with the always stop, similar thing, it could go in, it could function well from an operations perspective. The primary concern with that is it doesn't have the added flexibility necessarily of the signal in the roundabout to accommodate larger amounts of traffic or larger pedestrian traffic necessarily. We still expect it to function pretty well, but one of the concerns as well is that it is at that line between the rural and the urban suburban environment, and there's concerns if people won't recognize that condition of a stop control. So that's one reason that we were concerned about that, just that there isn't anything requiring people to slow down necessarily, and that still does introduce a potential conflict with passing or pedestrians crossing the road if the stop sign is missed. So we also looked at a signal and a roundabout, and I'll provide some more details on both of those. So the signal alternative that's shown currently includes bump outs or curb extensions, and with those, the intent is just to reduce that overall crossing distance at the intersection. Right now, it's about 60 feet curb to curb. So that's a long way for a pedestrian to hop out on the shoulder and be exposed all the way until they get to the curb ramp on the other side. So the intent is just to move that in a little bit and reduce that down to 48, 50 feet, something like that. So we did measure traffic speeds out here as part of the study, and folks were driving 36, 37 miles per hour on average through the intersection, north and south. So that would be perpetuated with the traffic signal where people would still be allowed to drive through there at that speed when it's a green light. The design vehicle out here, really no limitation, same as today, so it's easy to get bigger vehicles through the intersection. From an operations perspective, again, I think if you see the side street stop controls operating pretty well, the signal's going to too. So it's going to serve vehicles. There are sensors in there, so it does flip traffic, so when someone approaches it, it gives them the green time, but there is still a transition time and some minimum times that it needs to stay green before it flips over. So as you see, during peak conditions, you probably won't notice, and it'll continue to kind of funnel through and provide people access. During the off-peak times, I'm sure you've all sat at a stoplight where it's a red light and there's nobody coming the other direction. So that would likely happen here, especially during the off-peak conditions where there isn't necessarily the conflict and it's taking a little bit of time to change the timings on that. But again, it would still operate efficiently. From a driver safety perspective, so like we said, there aren't a bunch of crashes at the intersection right now, and traffic signals aren't defined as a safety improvement. They sign right away and help people make it through the intersection more efficiently, but they inevitably do typically create more crashes, whether it's rear ends, just from people stopping at a yellow light and someone not wanting to go through the intersection, or other things. And we would look at other options like flashing yellow arrow, things like that, to keep people moving efficiently and try to keep people going through the intersection. But from a pedestrian safety standpoint as well, it is an improvement in that way that it does provide a dedicated movement for people to cross the roadway. So they press the button, the crossing indication comes on, and they can cross during their movement. There are still opportunities for people to take a right turn on red, or if we do have flashing yellow arrows, to turn and cross that during these protected type phases. So there are still conflicts, and there always are opportunities for people to run a light, things like that. So there is still exposure, but it is still a good, safe improvement for pedestrians across the intersection. From an overall noise perspective, we want to be cognizant of that next to the campground. So with the signal, there would be an expectation there would be more idling, there'd be more stopping and starting, just because you would be potentially stopping that north-south movement as opposed to the existing through stop where people just proceed through the intersection. So there's a potential for more noise at the intersection. And lighting wise too, right now there's only, I believe, one light in a corner. We would likely add some additional lights to the mast arms just to brighten it up and make it a safer environment for people to cross. For the single lane roundabout, one of the differences is that for the geometry of it, it's designed to slow people down as they proceed through the intersection. So the design speed of it would be 20 to 25 miles per hour. So as you see people proceeding through the intersection, it'd be more of the 20-25 range as opposed to the 35 to 37 that's out there today. And with that, the expectation or the hope then would be is that speed would then be somewhat perpetuated north of the intersection as well. So where people at times today cross mid-block as they go across, hopefully the improved sidewalks are going to funnel people to these crossing locations, but it should slow speeds down north of the corridor as well and just provide a safer environment for pedestrians. One question that we've got was the design vehicle out here. We know that there's a lot of big vehicles going into the campground, and we want to make sure that we can continue to accommodate them. So as part of this, we did have run truck turning movements and truck turning movement paths to accommodate a WB62, which is a semi hauling a 48-foot trailer, as somewhat of a design vehicle. We also looked at an RV pulling a boat. So there are some elements, other elements that we heard today that I think we can dig in a little bit more to specific design vehicles, but we felt this was a good conservative starting point to make sure that the roundabout would fit and accommodate the vehicles that it needs to accommodate. So from an operations perspective, again, the theme of the night, this would operate very well too. One of the benefits of a roundabout is it continuously moves traffic, right? So there wouldn't be idling, there wouldn't necessarily be stopping at a red light and waiting for it to turn to your turn. If there's a gap in traffic, you could proceed through the intersection. So from a noise perspective, it would expect to be pretty minimal. There won't be that acceleration and deceleration experience with the signal, and people would just always move through the intersection. So whether that's off-peak, if it's evening, if it's winter, whenever it is, it would just provide an opportunity for people to just continue to move through the intersection rather than be prohibited by a stoplight or a stop sign or something else. From a driver safety perspective, roundabouts are very safe as well. So on average, 37% reduction in crashes and 78% reduction in severe crashes. So I know those are statistics, but bottom line is roundabouts are safe, and that is a combination of reducing conflict points, so interactions of where crashes can occur, as well as reducing driver speed. All of that leads to safer intersection treatment. From a pedestrian standpoint, safety-wise, it does also provide a two-stage crossing. So right now you're crossing essentially 60 feet at a time. With a roundabout, you essentially approach the roadway. You look your single direction to see that vehicle, make sure they stop, cross the roadway to the center median. You're safe there in that refuge area. Look the other way, see that pedestrian approaching, or see that vehicle approaching, wait for them to stop, and then cross the roadway. So it's very little exposure. You're exposed maybe 18 feet at a time rather than that full 60 feet where you could get potentially hung out to dry in that area. One of the things that got brought up is the lighting at a roundabout. So where a signal would be more concentrated at the roundabout, we would likely expand that out a little bit further on each of the legs just because it is more complex geometry. But there are efficiencies in lighting now where we can guide the light that's perpetuated from the lights more so on the roadway, so it doesn't necessarily hit the campground or other elements further back. So that is a consideration, but there are some workarounds, I guess, to make it less impactful in the environment. So just digging a little bit, and I guess I should take a step back. And it is on there, so, and you probably heard as part of the previous presentation that this is the recommended technical alternative, just for the reasons of the benefits for operations during the peak and off-peak conditions to kind of continuously keep traffic moving from a pedestrian safety perspective in slowing vehicles down, minimizing conflict points, and providing safe environment for both pedestrians and vehicles. So digging a little bit more into the pedestrian safety element of this, one of the advantages of the signal, I think we've heard, was that initial familiarity with it. I think people are comfortable with it. It's a defined movement. The red light tells someone to stop. So there's a defined stop of when someone can cross the intersection. So just that comfort level. From a conflict point standpoint, I don't want to get too far into it, but if you look at the conflict points, so where vehicles interact with other vehicles, if you're coming this way, you have to interact with left turn movement coming this way, a southbound left coming the other way. There's just a lot of different interaction between vehicles. So at a conventional intersection, there's 32 opportunities of vehicle tracking or crossing paths. At a roundabout, there's 8. From a pedestrian standpoint, there's 24 for a pedestrian vehicle and 8 for a pedestrian vehicle in a roundabout. So it's a 75% reduction in conflict points for vehicles and 67 for roundabouts or for pedestrians. So it's quite a bit safer from that perspective. Driver speed, I already mentioned the speed reduction from about 35, 37 miles per hour on the main line to closer to that 20, 25 miles per hour. And just some statistics. So at 20 miles per hour, it's a 13% likelihood of a severe or fatal injury crash if a pedestrian is hit. If the speed gets up to 30 to 40, increases to somewhere between 40 and 73%. So it just shows that, and it's intuitive, but the faster people drive, if you get hit by a faster driver, you're more likely to get injured. So and roundabouts do a nice job of just slowing people down. Ped wait times. So the roundabout always provides a safe environment for pedestrians to cross. It's instantaneous when a gap's available and a vehicle stops where you can cross. From a signal standpoint, you have to press the button and wait for your movement before you proceed through. So it's quicker, I guess, from that perspective. Driver line of sight, a small one, but just as you approach the intersection as a driver, your line of sight goes up to see the signal, to see if it's red, yellow, or green, and then back down to see the pedestrian. From a roundabout standpoint, you're looking straight forward and your eyes kind of stay on what the environment is in front of you. So a little bit safer from that perspective as well. And then the driver decision making, I think it's a two-part thing because there's a little bit of discomfort in making sure people stop at a roundabout, but at a signal, there are the permissive, like right turns where people could just kind of, a right turn on red or the flashing yellow arrow. There are still opportunities for drivers to interact with pedestrians. So a little bit of comfort versus, I guess, statistics safety-wise. So pros and cons to both of them there. And then the final slide I have is just public engagement and next steps. So we have comment cards in the back if you have anything you want to share. Otherwise, we'll do another Q&A as well. We have a project website that's up, and we do have a virtual application there. We can click on it and drop pins in. I don't know if any of you folks did that last go around, but all these alternatives that are around the room and on the screen are on that virtual application. So if you want to go in there and drop a pin and provide a comment on there as well, or see what other people are commenting on, that's all online. If you provide your email address, we can get you on a mailing list with the sign-in sheet or the comment cards as well. Otherwise, yeah, next steps, we hit on this before, but we're in the study phase and looking to just identify that recommendation and then once that occurs, move into preliminary final design with the end result being a construction project in 2024. So that's about it. Yep.
Is the parking going to be where the potential egress site is? Do you know the parking the food center's going to be?
I guess there's some conversations occurring with the city that a possible site is the school, but really a lot of it is just relying on the current city facilities at this time. So there's no, parking. It's going to be mainly drop-offs for the Loon Center on the site.
So when people are exiting the campground,
Mm-hmm.
do they have to stop for entering that roundabout if they have a big rig?
It's a yield, yes.
It's a big deal.
So if they have a gap, they can enter in. Yep.
Question.
Mhm.
So that particular intersection unites two snowmobile trails, southwest or east. What accommodations would that roundabout have for snowmobile?
Yeah, so we got that comment earlier too. I think that paired with the bike one is something that we'll dig into. I think we can look at different accommodations or different areas to provide crossings. Otherwise, we can look at potentially providing, I don't know how it would fit, but wider center medians or ways to accommodate snowmobiles across the roundabout. I don't know if you have experience.
Wordkey, I don't know if you know him, he is honestly the president of Ideal Snow Pros. He called me months ago and I connected with him yesterday. There's some concerns about it, but they can accommodate. So if you're familiar with Nisswa, there's a roundabout that is right through the Paul Bunyan Trail, which is full of snowmobiles. That's able to accommodate it with similar volumes. So it's something to be considered. What you see there today may not accommodate, but it is a consideration.
For the roundabouts that are constructed, size-wise, how does this compare to the number that are already constructed? Obviously, I would think on the smaller side as far as radius and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's not a mini or compact. It's not ultra small, but the current design of it is, I guess, medium small end. And I think we'll kind of see how it fits. I think again, this is just a concept design, so.
How does it compare to the small
I
I,
didn't put together this concept.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few questions. So we have an FAQ document that's pulled together, frequently asked questions. So that's something we can add, and we'll get some comps to other roundabouts in the area.
Of the roundabouts that are, whether in the county or the state or whatever, how many of them involve a fair amount of pedestrian traffic? So many of them that I see are fairly remote and, work well and don't have a lot of pedestrian traffic. Now, in your figures, you quoted, situations with pedestrians and such like that. Does that take into account only those that are involved with pedestrian traffic, or is that taking into account all roundabouts across the state?
Can you just reiterate the question for the people on, I know that was a long one, but for those online, or speak very loud. Maybe you can just
Speak a little bit louder.
Well, the question being with regard to pedestrian traffic, when it comes down to it, when you quoted statistics, when it comes down to pedestrian traffic, does that involve all roundabouts across the state, across the county, with or without pedestrian crossings involved? How does that work? And I'm just trying to get down to the root of where your statistics come from, because if you're drawing from all of them, then it's kind of a blended then at that point in time. It's not really, I would say, true with regard to the experience with a pedestrian on roundabout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me that makes sense. If your study group is a bunch of rural ones, and there's only one with a bunch of pedestrians in there, and then pedestrian crashes are underrepresented only because you're only looking at ones where there's nobody there. I don't know if the statistics that we use consider all of them. I actually think they do.
Yeah.
There was a traffic, this conversation with communities happens over and over and over, and just as hot and contested as this was. So Pelican Rapids, Minnesota, State Highway 59, it's almost vacation land USA like it is here, south of Detroit Lakes, you have the Lakes country there. They are also going through this too, but it's on the state highway. And in response to one resident who may have attended a similar meeting, came up with boiled down a bunch of these statistics that I kept reading over and over and over again, and he did a really nice job. And I think one of the bigger takeaways that I saw was that since 2011, only one person, and I'm assuming all the roundabouts, only one person has died in a roundabout. Is that how you read that too?
Yep.
And that is not true for signalized intersections or other control mechanisms too. I think to answer your question, in that statistic, it was like one person has died since 2011 in a situation like this. That's probably considering all of them in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So simply Minnesota.
Yeah, and expand on that. So the statistics are statewide, but we are having conversations with MnDOT, Office of Traffic Safety professionals that do encounter and that do work in areas such as this, and kind of pick their brain on optimal alternatives, things like that, just to make sure that we're not being short-sighted or narrow-sighted in what we're proposing or reviewing or how we're approaching the solution.
Cost isn't obviously always the end all when it comes down to things, but in your engineering estimates, if you will, how does the roundabout compare to traffic signal?
Well, I had started to answer this question before. There was a gentleman that stood up at one of the council meetings and thought that a signal system would cost about $1 million something. I think we're more in $500,000 range, and the roundabout might be $1 million. The long-term operational cost and the long-term cost when you factor in crashes, when MnDOT and other transportation professionals do a cost-benefit analysis, they include the cost of crashes, including deaths. And so by far, the safety savings and the reductions of injury crashes, deaths, and other things that happen in these intersections far outweigh the signal. So upfront cost, more expensive. Long-term costs, operationally, and cost human life, much cheaper. Much cheaper.
You speak of Pelican Rapids, and I think this is probably a somewhat unique situation here with start-stop coming out of the park like that. Pelican Rapids, anything like that, or is that a free flow of vehicle traffic from multiple directions? Where here you've got people starting to stack up, trying to come out with some pretty serious equipment, at least.
It's similar. So I just started looking at this. I don't claim to know Pelican Rapids, what's going on there. It's two county roads. County Road 108 is what it is. One leg goes to the south and one to the north. So they're kind of both a three-way intersection like this with a very low volume leg. You have the state highway on two legs, County Road 108 on the other leg, and then a minor city road on the other side, if I remember right. There's signals right now. They're going to they're considering going from where some people want it now here back to this. Now, I don't know if it's finalized yet. If you go to the MnDOT's website, it's all over there. They have videos like we have here of this. So it seems to me that it's actually going to happen. But the point is that this conversation is happening over and over. And some are making that hard decision, like the signals aren't working, now we need to go to this.
I think, when it comes down to pedestrian crossing and such, and you mentioned it, with people taking and cutting across away from the intersection, does that create more of a hazard, roundabout versus stoplight? What's your consideration with regard to that, where
I think the initial hope is that, I guess the sidewalk will help to gather those people and bring them to a safe crossing location, whether that's at Swan or at the 3 and 66 intersection. So a sidewalk is gonna be provided and constructed along the east side of 66 all the way from the intersection all the way up to Bald Eagle Trail, essentially. So I guess just that to start. But to answer your question truly, I think with the speed reduction that a roundabout provides in slowing people down to 20 to 25 miles per hour instead of that 35 to 37, slower traffic is safer traffic. So in my perspective then, that the roundabout would provide the safer alternative for those mid-block crossings.
They're likely to continue to happen, but if we create an area where it's safer, more predictable, less complex, the hope is that we'll continue to drive people to these. I mean, the Loon Center is down that way anyway. So you're still gonna have unauthorized crossings. We are not gonna be able to eliminate that. Just people will dart across.
I didn't realize that there was not going to be parking in the campground, and so I really think that needs to be taken into account. How are you going to get those people across? It seems having them cross at the roundabout just doesn't seem, in my opinion, the right place, because it seems like it should be a signal, you stop, let the mass cross, you go, but maybe that's down the road further back to school or something, but it feels like there needs to be a planned way to get people from that school. In my opinion, it wouldn't be the crosswalk, or the roundabout is not.
There's currently RRFB, or the rapid flashing rectangular beacon,
Yep.
the one that flashes right at the school. That will remain there. The plan is to remain there. It might change a little bit, the configuration, but the intent is to keep that there. They could have the opportunity to go down to the roundabout if they want to do, because there will be a sidewalk provided on that side of the road. So, yeah, I think one of the things that kind of even surprised me, I got educated, is that they are, if you believe the statistics, I know not everybody does, certainly not everybody in the last group believes, is that 40% reduction in crashes between a signal and a roundabout. And for all the reasons that Jake had talked about, shorter distance to cross, less assumptions. Think of all the assumptions that you and I make every day at a stop sign, at a signal. Other guy's gonna stop, the other's gonna see me, the other guy's not gonna be on his phone, he's sober. All of those things, you can start to take some of those away in these areas of roundabouts. And that's why I believe, and that's what the literature says, about a 40% reduction in pedestrian crashes at a roundabout. And I didn't think it was that high. And it is counterintuitive that you're keeping traffic moving, but you're also supposed to stop for pedestrians. It is counterintuitive, but it shows that it's easier, they're going slower,
And it's one lane, or it's one lane of traffic coming through, right? It's not, there's no one trying to sneak around or anybody to cut across. It's one lane of traffic, it's one driver. You need to acknowledge, came to a stop, and then cross that location. So with any crosswalk location, you can't go darting across. You have to make sure and confirm that they stop for you. But yeah, there are very high yielding statistics where pedestrian or drivers will stop for pedestrians too. I know it probably seems counterintuitive, like Tim mentioned, but.
we just have to get up to the mic.
Oh, okay, got it, okay.
No, the same statistics, and this may make sense, is that in multiple lane roundabouts, have you seen those where you can go around two? The pedestrian safety does go down because now it's a more complex situation and more assumptions are being made with these pedestrians and the vehicles navigating those. So what's proposed here is a single lane roundabout in every direction, which is reduced complexity and closer to the statistics. So we talked about over a signal is 40% reduction in it says collisions, not deaths, just collisions, interactions.
kind of mentioned with regard to the amount of traffic flow, vehicles, what kind of statistics are you using with regard to the Loon Center and increased pedestrian traffic? I mean, what's in the mix there with regard to the way you're calculating that?
Yeah, I can hit on that. So it is a bit of an, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so the question is how does the Loon traffic, or the Loon Center traffic from a pedestrian standpoint been incorporated in the analysis? And the answer to that, I guess, is that we did look at it, and so another figure here, but if you see these dots in the bottom corner, so the capacity of a roundabout at a daily level is typically 25,000 vehicles per day entering, just high level. It really depends on the individual characteristics, but even during the Labor Day peak conditions out here, it's about 12,000 vehicles per day. So the roundabout has a lot of extra capacity as we looked at the operations, and we did insert pedestrian traffic that's out there today, and we actually doubled the amount of pedestrian traffic that we feel is that's out there today as well to try to account for that, and the roundabout still functioned very well. So we tried to look at it from a few different angles, from higher level planning standards, detailed analysis, and it looks like in all accounts it's going to continue to function well.
With the conversation you had in the previous group, is there anything, and this might be premature, that may change your recommendation when it comes down to the roundabout versus possible alternatives as far as the intersection is concerned?
I mean, I think we're definitely taking the input into consideration. I know that we were going to look deeper into the always stop alternative as well, and I know even with this one we kind of glossed over that a little bit on how we dismissed that, but providing some more context and more review and analysis of that. The work has been done for that, but I think with the public input, maybe taking a different look at it and just seeing how it still fits.
You know, I mentioned it before, is we want to have the safest alternative. And that's up for debate, obviously. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of folks that just, I want to cross at a light and feel that that's the safest. We've been doing it since we've been kids. That's what we're familiar with. And we're not as familiar with roundabouts. And so we're looking at, I mean, we're relying on these statistics and people, I mean, like I said, these conversations are happening all over the country. And I don't want to be wrong. I mean, that's, and I think, like I said, the statistics kind of show, it surprised me too. 40% reduction. It's been about the pedestrians. What Jake has been saying about all of these is that they all work. They all work for the vehicles, but how these interactions work with pedestrians has always been the primary consideration. And the recommendation is based on a lot on that. The function with pedestrians, they work well with lowering speed, calming traffic, better pedestrians, those kind of things. So.
I know costs always, are involved with regard to decision processes when it comes down to, constructing things. But has there been any other consideration, because you're still, have pedestrians on, the base surface elevation? Has there been any consideration, any kind of pedestrian crossover, bridge, tunnel, anything else along those ways, that direction?
Somebody did ask that in the earlier group, and my answer was there's been no official consideration. And this is really just coming from experience. I mean, I've been associated with several projects with this is, request to do this. There's just not enough room. There's a requirement that you have to have ramps. It has to be accessible by everybody. So Americans with Disabilities Act requires that it has to have certain slope and ramps. And think how far back spirals, I don't know if they even build they call them pigtails. Then the challenge comes, will people use them? Is it just easier to dart across the road than to go up, flights of, you can't even put stairs in anymore, and those kind of things. Now a tunnel, kind of same thing. It's just down, You still have to have very gradual, and think about how much real estate you have to get down. And I think there was somebody that's been a longtime resident that talked about, well, that's been studied before, and she remembered the results where the bridge would have to start at Judy's House of Gifts, which is, past halfway to Reed's, and then well into the campground. And that real estate's certainly very sensitive too. So we didn't officially look at it, but just from experience, and most in our field can say it's going to be very challenging. And then after you spent that money and time, will people use it even? Because it's, it is just 50 feet across the road. So. Well, thank you. One more.
Your true test, just for the record, personally, I do believe Roundabout is the best option for this. I've been in public safety my whole life, and I teach use not put intersections to ensure drivers get familiar with them. As a nation, we're way behind the curve in utilization of roundabouts for years. It's been there for years.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just like fear of the unknown. But in my humble opinion, 5 years after construction, and I hope the county board of commissioners do recommend the roundabout, I mean that sincerely. And it was constructed in 2024, your true test is going to be 5 years down the road. And where I've seen a roundabout, if there's a failure, it's because the radius hasn't been big enough.
Right.
That's where people go absolutely bonkers, because they had negative opinions about it in the first place. And the radius is too small, and trucks have difficulty. We're dealing with a campground.
Yep.
There's very expensive rigs coming in and out of there. If it isn't big enough, it'll fail.
Agreed. In general, the bigger the better, but we have a limited amount of real estate, so.
Pedestrian safety, and conflict points, and everything like that. This is by far the safest.
Can I read something from this? Again, this is something from this letter that a project manager, just like Jake or MnDOT representative, wrote to a constituent group. And I thought it was pretty profound. I even highlighted it. It says, this new road design concept shifts the designer's perspective to a more human-centered approach, recognizing that humans make mistakes and their bodies are fragile. We are leveraging our design to facilitate the outcome we'd like to see our roadways rather than rely on failed past practices. We know that people make mistakes on our roadways, but we don't think that they should have to die for that mistake. So people make mistakes. They run red lights, they run stop signs, they step out when they shouldn't. Pedestrians, but they shouldn't. Everybody's gonna make mistakes. They're gonna be made at the roundabout, they're gonna be made at four-way stops and signals, but the consequences of that mistake at those things are catastrophic, or have the potential of being catastrophic. Or even just two vehicles meeting at 20 miles an hour. I thought that was really profound. We're in the business of safety, and that's why we're recommending, why the recommendation is the safest alternative, which is Roundabout. And I agree that there are a lot of people that aren't convinced yet. There's a lot of them around, but not enough for people to be very, really comfortable with them. And I think that's where some of it's coming from.
Question, you touched on it, but what are you looking at in your estimate as far as schedules concerned for construction?
The year is 2024. Yep, the year is 2024. I was encouraged this year. We built one at Wise Road and Beaver Dam Road, if you're familiar with that, in 6 weeks. That was rural. It was bigger. We realized how sensitive it is. We talked about adding incentives or disincentives into these construction contracts to do it. I think we could maybe find more traction, regardless of what the final outcome is, to add incentives. We realize how sensitive detouring traffic is. We were acutely aware of that after this year, and that was a good learning experience for us. We were watching So we're gonna shorten it, and we can do that through some contract language, and things like that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you. Any questions online, TJ?
No, no.
Okay. Thank you all for coming.